Over the last couple of weeks, I've analyzed every new Yu-Gi-Oh card release from the past 5 years in the TCG to determine which character and series got the most support. But today, we're shifting gears and taking a closer look at Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds. I'll be counting down the top 10 most supported 5Ds characters based on the number of new cards they received over the past 5 years. And now without any further ado,
now let's get up to speed with Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds!
Alright, so for those of you who've watched the other videos in the series, some of the numbers I'll be presenting here are slightly different than a couple of weeks ago. That's because this time, I've also included everything from Alliance Insights, now that the full set list is confirmed in the TCG. If you're wondering how all this data was collected and organized, it's all explained in the first video of the series. And as always, the link to every other video in the series is in the description. Alright, first up we already have 2 characters tied at 7 support cards each. The first one is Luna or Ruka in the Japanese version, thanks to the 6 brand new cards she just received in Alliance Insights. Before that she was just sitting at 1 support card, Armored White Bear, which came out in Battles of Legend Armageddon all the way back in 2020. This new wave finally gave Luna her very own archetype, centered around her Signer Dragon Ancient Fairy Dragon. She even received an upgraded version of her boss monster, Ancient Fairy Life Dragon, a cool nod to her brother Signer Dragon Livestream Dragon. For context, the final episode of 5Ds aired back in March 2011 in Japan, which means it took Konami over 14 years to finally give Luna her very own dedicated archetype. Here's hoping they follow up with more support soon, to flesh it out further and make it a proper standalone strategy. I really wonder how decisions like this happen at Konami. Did they hire a new intern who binged watched every Yu-Gi-Oh series as homework, and suddenly realized there were 6 signers, not just 4? And then that intern presented their findings to an executive, along with a helpful reminder that there's still free money left to print. And just like that, Luna's support was finally greenlit. Anyway, moving on to the next character, coming in tied with Luna is Antinomy, also known as Bruno. The first TG cards were introduced back in 2011, and after that it took Konami 8 years to revisit the archetype, finally giving it some support in 2019. That was a long stretch without any upgrades. The support that counts toward this ranking came later, in a single wave released in Age of Overlord in 2023, which introduced 7 brand new cards for the TG archetype. That means it took over 4 years to get back to the deck again. Definitely an improvement over the 8-year gap we saw before. Hopefully Konami keeps slashing that downtime in half, which means we're due for some new support this year. Next there are 2 more characters tied with 8 support cards each. Let's get my personal most disappointing one out of the way first. Aki or Akiza in the dub. She received 5 new support cards back in February 2021, which introduced a brand new boss monster for the archetype, Ruddy Rose Dragon. After that we got a couple more cards in King's Court and Battles of Legend sets. But it's definitely been a while since we've gotten anything near substantial for Black Rose. And honestly it feels like such a waste. Yu-Gi-Oh already struggles when it comes to introducing strong female characters in the anime. So when they actually do build one up like Aki, it'd be great to see Konami give her a bit more attention in the TCG too. If we're lucky, maybe the same intern who discovered Luna will also remind the sales team that there were 2 female signers. Now from one of the most undersupported popular characters to one of the most supported characters I'd never expected, Yanagi Tenzen. Yeah, this guy dueled once in the anime, and I actually went back to rewatch that duel just to measure how long it lasted. Turns out it was about 5 minutes. That's it. So let's recap. 1 duel, 5 minutes, and somehow Konami decided he deserves more support than Luna and the same amount as Akiza. I don't know what kind of power this man holds at Konami HQ, but clearly someone's a Yanagi fan. Alright, now for his support, this came in 2 separate waves. The first one was in Battles of Legend Crystal Revenge, which introduced 4 of his cards. Then about a year later the second half dropped in Maze of Millennia, adding another 4 cards and bringing his total up to 8. Next up on the list with 9 support cards is Aporia with his Mech Lord archetype. And this character and archetype involved some interesting decisions when it came to categorization. Aporia was originally split into 3 separate characters in the show. Each of them used a different sub-archetype within the Mech Lord theme. And eventually they all merged back together to form Aporia. But categorizing them separately creates some tricky problems when trying to assign generic Mech Lord support that doesn't clearly belong to just one of the 3. So to keep things simple, I decided to merge all of the Mech Lord support under Aporia. First, Aporia received 2 support cards in Battles of Legend Armageddon. These were just some random cards he used in the anime, and they don't actually support the Mech Lord archetype itself. Then a few months later, in Legendary Duelist Rage of Ra, he received 7 more dedicated Maclord cards, bringing his total up to 9 support cards, making him the number 7 on this list. After Aporia you have 2 characters tied with 10 support cards each. Let's start with Leo, or Lua in the Japanese version. His first major wave of support came in Power of the Elements, with 7 new cards. In the OCG these were originally released in a Legendary Duelist pack, where Lua was actually on the cover, alongside with his upgraded boss monster Power Tool Braver Dragon. But for some reason Konami decided to not release that set in the TCG, and instead spread the cards across various products. Alongside his new boss monster, the wave included 6 more cards to help modernize his Morphtronic deck. Then just a few months later, Leo received 3 more cards in Battles of Legend Crystal Revenge, bringing his total up to 10. Coming in tied with Leo is Kiryu or Callan Kessler in the dub. His first wave of support came in Venom Rage, introducing 5 new cards for his Infernity archetype. That was followed up by 4 more cards in Ghosts from the Past 2, and 1 last card in Maze of Memories. That final card was this creepy little punk, featuring Kiryu right on the artwork, directly inspired by the Crashdown arc, where he was actually called a creepy little punk in the dub. I always appreciate it when Konami sneaks in an anime throwback like this. It really adds something special for anime fans. And thanks to that card, this creepy little punk is now tied with Leo for the 5th spot on this list. Next up is a character whose placement actually surprised me a bit, Crow Hogan. I expected him to land in the top 3 right from the start, but he just missed out. His biggest boost came from a massive wave of support in Darkwing Blast, with a total of 10 new cards for his Blackwing archetype. This support also introduced an upgraded form of his Signer Dragon, Black Winged Assault Dragon. A full wave of 10 cards for an already established archetype is pretty rare. Even most of the character-themed structure decks we've seen in recent years don't offer that much new cards. After that, he got 2 more cards in different Battles of Legend sets, Sharingan the Waning Moon and Synchro Creed, which he originally used in the manga. That brings his total up to 12 support cards, making Crow the number 4 on this list. Next up, just before we hit the top 3, is another under-supported character, me. These videos take a ton of time to put together, digging through card databases, reviewing episodes, and apparently also sometimes measuring how long certain duels in the anime actually lasted. Plus double checking wiki pages just to make sure they didn't miss anything. So if you have been enjoying these ranking videos, let me know by liking, subscribing and dropping a comment on which 5D's character you think deserves more support. And if I missed anything, definitely point it out. Your feedback helps me make these videos even better. Alright, back to the list. We're entering the top 3, and 2 characters actually ended up tied. First up is the Master of Faster himself, Jack Atlas. Jack received 5 one-off support cards spread across different sets. The most notable one of those is the crazy boss monster Red Supernova Dragon, an upgraded version of Red Nova Dragon. But Jack's biggest boost came from his very own structure deck in 2023, the Crimson King. This wave introduced 8 brand new cards for his Resonator and Red Dragon Archfiend archetype, dramatically improving its consistency, retraining several of his classic monsters, and even giving you a way to still play the original Red Dragon Archfiend alongside all the new tools. I always appreciate it when Konami goes the extra mile to make sure the OG boss monster still has a place in the deck. Alright, now let's move on and see which character actually received even more support than Crow and tied with Jack Atlas. It is Sherry LeBlanc. Her deck was one of the last remaining from 5D's that still hadn't made it into the real game. That finally changed almost 10 years after the anime ended, with its debut in Legendary Duelist Synchro Storm. This first wave introduced entirely new cards that didn't appear in the anime but were clearly inspired by the monsters she used. The most notable one of them is Baron the Floor, a top contender for one of the best boss monsters ever printed. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to make her deck viable on its own. Baron was so generically powerful that other decks ended up using it way more effectively, which is why it was banned in 2024. Just a few months after Synchro Storm, she received her second wave of support in Brothers of Legend, introducing 6 more cards. This time the wave included several of her actual anime cards, like Horse of the Floral Knights, Santower Mina and even Soul Binding Gates. Altogether that brought Sherry's total up to 13 support cards, surpassing Crow and tying her with Jack Atlas, 2 of the most popular 5D's characters, for the runner-up spot on this list. But while Jack and Sherry secured the dual runner-up spot, there's one character Jay just can't catch up with, because when it comes to getting support, no one outraces Yusei Fudo, taking the number 1 spot on this list. Most of Yusei's support came from the Dawn of Majesty core set, which introduced 8 new cards to his Stardust Synchron archetype. The most notable one is an upgraded version of his boss monster, Shooting Majestic Star Dragon. We also got a baby Synchron version of Stardust Dragon, Stardust Synchron. Pretty cool. A couple of years later, Yusei received a second wave of support in Duelist Nexus, which retrained another one of his iconic boss monsters into Cosmic Quasar Dragon. Outside of those 2 waves, Yusei picked up 7 more cards scattered across other products, bringing his grand total to 20 support cards. There are a few cards in Yusei's lineup that could be categorized differently depending on your interpretation. In my overall analysis video, I already explained why I counted Shooting Star Dragon TGEX as a Yusei card. Its artwork closely resembles Yusei Synchro Dragons, its effect follows the same design style, and it was positioned as a Yusei card in its Japanese release. Assault Synchron and Revolution Synchron could arguably be counted toward Crow and Leo instead, since they're Synchron versions of their monsters. But because they're part of the broader Synchron archetype, and Revolution Synchron was released alongside other Yusei support in Duelist Nexus, I decided to count them toward Yusei. And that wraps up the top 10 most supported characters. But there are a few more characters who also received some support. We got 4 Nordic support cards in Battle of Chaos. Since all 3 members of Team Ragnarok used this archetype, I decided to group these cards together under Team Ragnarok, instead of trying to divide the support among individual members. We also got 3 new Earthbound Immortal cards, which I also decided to categorize together. The newer Earthbound Prisoners and Servants were categorized separately, since they were specifically used by an Arc 5 character. As for the final bits of character-specific support, Grady got 1 card, Ice Mirror in Brothers of Legend, and Sid Barlow received Combat Wheel in Maze of Millennia. I also categorized 6 cards as generic 5D support, specifically all of the Crimson Dragon cards. After so many years, it's really awesome that Konami finally decided to print the Crimson Dragon as an actual card, along with support built around it. Since the Crimson Dragon isn't tied to any one character, I categorize it all under the series as a whole. And that wraps up all of the 5D support from the past 5 years. In total, 5D's ended up with 132 support cards, which put it on the lower end compared to the other 6 main Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. When I ranked all of the series in my first video, 5D's landed in 4th place, ahead of Reigns and Zexal. But since the release of that video, Zexal actually surpassed 5D's in total support. Even though 5D's didn't get as much love overall compared to some of the other shows, and even though I have complained throughout the video about how Aki and Luna didn't get nearly enough support, I do think Konami actually stepped up things for 5D's in recent years. With the release of Alliance Insight, Konami upgraded every signer's boss monster, and even gave us the Crimson Dragon as a playable card. They also finally remembered the female characters for once, giving both Sherry and Luna their very own archetype. And even though Akiza's new cards were a bit limited, she still got a dedicated wave of support, plus a few extra one-offs. It's also worth noting that Akiza received a separate support wave back in 2019, which falls just outside the time frame of this analysis. And from what I could gather, she barely got anything between 2011 and 2019. So while these characters definitely didn't get enough, it's a good sign that Konami is finally starting to give them some attention after ignoring them for almost 10 to 15 years. One notable character missing from this list is Carly Carmine. She didn't receive any new support over the past 5 years either. She got a few cards back in 2019, but it's definitely time for Konami to revisit her archetype as well. As for full character decks that still haven't been printed from 5D's, there aren't really many left. With Sherry's deck finally printed, most of the major ones have already made it into the TCG. The only ones still missing that I could think of are more obscure decks, like Lawton's Gun Ogre deck from the Crashdown arc, and Familiar's deck from his duel against Jack. I really hope that Konami brings these to the TCG as well. Now I wanna hear from you. Which 5D's character do you think deserves support the most? And are there any cards that I missed or could be categorized differently? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more anime support breakdowns like this. I see you later.